Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto accidentally kissed Sakura first time at the place of Sasuke in the Academy Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Team 7's roster will be, the Chunin instructor Iruka Umino said to his gathered students. The recently graduated boy who only a few nights before learned that he was the container of the most powerful of all the tailed beasts listened with anticipation almost positive that was his team about to be announced. Naruto Uzumaki. Yes, he thought elated before crossing his fingers thinking, Sakura and anybody but Sasuke. Repeating it in his head over and over again until, Sakura Haruno. Alright, he shouted standing up in his joy but noticed that Sakura seemed to deflate like a balloon. Hardly upset as he was sure he could make her change her mind about him after all he had to change a whole villages if he was going to become Hokage. But the next name caused the two of them to switch moods as Iruka said, and Sasuke Uchiha. Damn it, Naruto said flopping into his chair. Natural he raised a fuss and Iruka pointed out that due to his lousy grades the best student was paired with worse. The rest of the teams were assembled not that Naruto was paying attention, but when Iruka said, I suggest you get to know your teammates and we'll introduce the Junin senseis after lunch. Naruto went off to eat on his own positive Sakura would turn him down, but as he ate by himself he was hit by a flash of inspiration. Managing to get the jump on Sasuke he left him tied up and went in search of his pink-haired crush. Sakura was depressed since Sasuke had turned her down cold to eating together. Working over her plan of attack in her head she came to the sad conclusion that the only thing noteworthy about her was her forehead. She was pulled from her depressing thoughts when she looked up and saw Sasuke standing across from her, his eyes staring right into her. Sasuke's staring at me so intensely, she thought before fantasizing Sasuke saying, Sakura, you have such a large and charming forehead. It makes me want to kiss it. Needless to say, hearing those very words repeated stunned the girl. The part of herself that often spoke up for her in her mind shouted, hell yeah, he's mine. But her fantasy came crashing down when Sasuke added, just kidding, that's something Naruto would say. Nevertheless Sasuke sat down next to her on the bench, but again he surprised her saying, Sakura, there's something I want to ask you. What do you think of Naruto? Sakura paused a moment not sure why Sasuke wanted to talk about Naruto but was willing to indulge his curiosity. Naruto's annoying. All he does is get in my way and doesn't understand anything about me. All I want is for you to acknowledge me. I'm serious because I like you. Seeing her chance Sakura began to move in to kiss him. However a gurgling sound attracted her attention and Sasuke tried to get up to leave. Acting on instinct she grabbed his wrist holding him there saying, please Sasuke, just one kiss. She could see Sasuke looked conflicted. Naruto really wanted to kiss her but whatever it was doing flips in his stomach was most insistent. He was also surprised at the incredible strong grip she had on him. He leaned in hoping she would let go, but when she closed her eyes he moved his lips to her forehead. One because he knew it had always bothered her and two because he had begun to feel guilty so didn't want to steal her first kiss under false pretenses. Feeling Sasuke's lips on her forehead was a dream come true for the pink-haired girl. Opening her eyes as Sasuke pulled back a blush adorned her cheeks, which she was surprised to see, was mirrored on Sasuke's. Naruto tried not to let the elation that appeared on Sakura's face get him down but it was hard. But more immediate concerns arose when his stomach protested about him forgetting its plight. Grabbing his midsection he had to choose between maintaining the henge or losing control of his bowels. Naturally he let go of the henge. He winced not just from the pain in his stomach but the joy on Sakura's face melting only to be replaced with shock which quickly turned into anger. Naruto, you bastard, she shouted, nailing him in the jaw. Stomping away Sakura left the battered boy who as quickly as he could, considering the whole earth seemed to be swaying, made his way to the bathroom. Sakura was still furious at the blonde prankster. Stupid Naruto, she thought agitated. The blonde had decided to sit in the back and keep quiet after lunch, which, since he had managed to anger both his new teammates, was probably for the best. But as time went by while they waited for their sensei, Sakura began to calm and wonder just how it was that Naruto had seemed to be inside her head. Not to mention the butterflies she had felt from when he stared at her. She had tried to play it off that he had looked like Sasuke, but that couldn't be the whole reason. At least she hoped not, as that made her rather shallow. No, there had been genuine warmth in his eyes when he stared at her, of that she was sure. It made her a little uncomfortable, but not in a bad way. She glanced back at him from her spot in the middle of the room, and although she could tell he was bored, made a point to look out the window. The door to the class opening drew her attention, and in walked a man wearing the standard Junin uniform. He had his headband tilted so that only one of his eyes was visible. He also appeared to be rather laid back as he strolled to the center of the room. Kakashi, staring at his future team, was a little disconcerted that they were spread out among the class. Sasuke was sitting in the front with his hands folded in front of him. Kakashi could tell that the boy was gauging his strength, trying to determine just how strong he was. The kunoichi was sitting in the middle of the class. She appeared to be a little put off about his late arrival. Finally, there was Naruto. He half expected that the blonde would have gotten up to some sort of mischief while he waited. But he looked to be depressed about something. Deciding he had left them on the hook long enough, he said, "How about we head up to the roof to learn a little more about each other?" Naruto still hadn't recovered his excitement about becoming a shinobi, thinking sadly, "Man, I blew it today. Sakura's never going to like me now." After they had told each other about their hopes and dreams, their new sensei had told them to meet early the next morning for a training exercise. Although he seemed to have delighted in telling them, it was actually a test which would determine if they actually became genin. Even though his whole future was on the line, he was still depressed about what Sakura had said when Kakashi had asked about what it was she disliked. Naruto had been her one-word reply. But he supposed he deserved it, as he would be upset to if someone pretend to be the pink-haired girl in order to get close to him. Having already blown his chance at love, he couldn't really work up the energy to get psyched about tomorrow's exam. Little did Naruto know that he was being followed by the girl of his affections. She couldn't get the way she had felt when he had complimented her forehead out of her mind. It didn't hurt also that she had run into the real Sasuke after clobbering Naruto and received a brisk, "You're annoying," as a result of her trying to talk to him. But her curiosity had grown due to what Naruto said during his introduction. About why he wanted to be Hokage, which was to make people notice him. After all, plenty of people noticed him due to his annoying pranks and such. Yet as she had followed him home discreetly, she noticed that people made a point of not seeing the blonde. Not to mention, since he didn't know he was being watched, he seemed more pensive. She assumed it was due to Kakashi telling them that there was a test tomorrow, but she didn't think that was solely it. Especially since once he reached a ramen stand, he appeared to brighten right up as he walked in, like he didn't want to burden the people inside with his troubles. Wanting to learn more about the suddenly mysterious Naruto, she hanged herself to look like an unassuming older man and entered the stand. Upon entering, she saw a cute young girl leaning over the counter as she talked to Naruto. The sad boy he had been only moments before seemed to have disappeared. But the waitress wasn't fooled, saying, "What's the matter, Naruto?" "Nothing, Ayame," the boy replied. Ayame stood back, putting her hands on her hips, and looked like she was about to pry more, but noticed that the hanged Sakura had her attention on her favorite customer. Smiling at Naruto, she said, "Did you wash up before you came here?" "Yep," he replied completely unconvincingly. "Why don't I believe you?" she said before telling him to go in the back while sending a look her father's way. The old man nodded, heading into the back as well on the pretense of getting some ingredients. Ayame sent a smile Sakura's way before walking to her. The hanged girl assumed it was to take her order. So it came as no surprise that she was caught completely unaware when Ayame pulled a cleaver from the behind the counter and said darkly, "Why are you so interested in that boy?" "What? I'm not," Sakura said, sweating nervously. I'm just here for some ramen. You better be, she said, her voice giving Sakura a very good idea of what would happen if she was lying. He has more than enough on his plate already. A pot rattling told Ayame that Naruto was on his way back to the front of the store. Cleaver disappearing from sight, she turned to the blonde as he appeared, giving no clue she had been brandishing a weapon and threatening a customer only seconds before. Naruto raised his hands, showing they were clean, before returning to his stool. Ayame took Sakura's order first, before returning and dotting on Naruto. As the waitress chatted with him, Sakura tried to understand what she had meant by Naruto had a lot to deal with, while being sure to keep her eyes solely on her ramen as she listened to the two talking. Now are you going to tell me why you are so down? Ayame said, her voice filled with concern. It's nothing really, Ayame. Come on, Naruto, I know you better than that. You should be bouncing off the walls since you graduated. Instead you are barely able to smile. Not to mention you've only had a single bowl, Tuki said. Dad, Ayame said, now's not the time to be worrying about all the extra stuff you prepared since you thought he was going to gorge himself today. Alright, Naruto conceded, I guess it's just I did something really stupid today. Oh, Ayame prompted. I hanged myself to look like Sasuke in order to ask the girl assigned to my team what she thought of me. Ayame understood, since she had often heard Naruto complain about Sasuke and all the attention that he garnered even though he didn't seem to want it. Well, that was kind of mean of you, Ayame said, to which Sakura had to agree. I know now, Naruto replied sadly, but I really wanted to know what she thought of me. It wasn't that Sakura girl you are always talking about, is it? Ayame asked. Naruto nodded before saying, yeah, I told her I think she had a cute forehead like I always wanted to. Sakura's eyes widened in surprise, but luckily for her, Ayame was too engrossed in Naruto's tale to notice that she was eavesdropping or blushing. Ayame, shaking her head, said, you know, she probably thinks Sasuke told her that, making her even more infatuated with him. Sakura also had to agree to that as she remembered how her heart had sped up and the joy she felt making her like him even more. No, all I succeeded in doing was making her hate me more, Naruto said dejectedly, not that she thought highly of me before. Since when she thought I was Sasuke, she said I get in her way and I'm annoying. She knows it was you, Ayame said, confused. Yeah, she tried to kiss me when she thought I was Sasuke, Naruto said. Ayame asked, you didn't take advantage, did you? I might have, Naruto said honestly, if I didn't suddenly get sick. I tried to get away, but she grabbed onto my arm and wouldn't let go. I kissed her forehead, since I didn't want to steal her first kiss like mine was taken from me. Ayame an eyebrow at that, but Naruto shook his head, saying he wasn't going to talk about it. Moving on, he said, well, in the end I dropped the hinge and she hit me. Later she said she hated me, so I guess I really screwed up. Putting another bowl in front of him, Tuki said, buck up, Naruto. Aren't you going to be Hokage one day? There'll be plenty of women, I guarantee you that. I guess, but they won't be Sakura. Naruto began to eat the free bowl and Ayame went to busy herself in back. Sakura meanwhile couldn't believe that Naruto thought so highly of her. She had always thought his constant asking out and other means of attracting her attention had been to get under her skin or in the way of Sasuke and her. But it appeared he genuinely cared and he had really meant what he said about her forehead, long considered her most unattractive feature. Finishing her meal, she left behind the money for it and headed home. When she arrived at her house, she noticed that no one was home, which suited her fine since her mom would probably pester her for all the day's details. Walking upstairs to her room, she looked in the mirror at herself. Remembering how she thought her body just didn't compare to the other kunoichi, she put her fingers to her forehead where Naruto had kissed her. Touching the spot, she was surprised to feel herself flush at the memory of it, as well as the small smile she saw that adorned her lips. Pulling her hand away, she thought, it's only because he looked like Sasuke. But even as she thought that, she knew that it wasn't entirely true. The honest way Naruto had spoken about her in the ramen stand had affected her too, making her feel better about herself and more self-confident. Looking at the time, Sakura realized she needed to get some sleep because tomorrow was going to be a make it or break it day. Team 7 was being given a second chance. After Kakashi had arrived hours late, he had told them they had until a buzzard rang to get 2 bells from him. Naturally, they had failed thus far. Naruto had attacked brazenly right from the get-go. After easily being handled by the Junin and left upside down in a tree, Sasuke had made his move. He had fared better as expected of the number 1 rookie, but in the end he had ended up buried up to his chin in the ground. Kakashi had then focused on Sakura, easily dispatching her with a genjutsu of her crush, badly wounded, sending her right into unconsciousness. While that had been going on, Naruto decided to grab the bento lunches, but Kakashi had stopped him and tied him to the pole. Although Kakashi had told them not to feed Naruto before he left, and she was still a little angry at him for his trick, she offered him her lunch. Naruto had been surprised, but not nearly as much as Sasuke. However, he didn't complain, seeing as he was going to have done it himself, realizing that if they were going to succeed, all 3 of them would need to be at full strength when they next assault the Junin. Plus, Naruto was proving himself to be quite a bit better than he anticipated and far stronger than Sakura. Kakashi had suddenly appeared, bearing down on the young girl, asking if she had trouble understanding his directions. Sakura had stuttered a response, but Sasuke, thinking more clearly as well as not wanting to return to the academy, had simply said that if they were going to stand any chance of taking the bells, they would need all 3 of them at 100%. Much to the surprise of all 3, Gen and Kakashi had passed them. They had then taken off, leaving the training grounds, forgetting the blonde still tied to the post. Naruto was surprised when 10 minutes later Sakura showed up and stopped in front of him. Hey, he said lamely. She was torn between glaring at the blonde and the interest that her observing him the day before had raised in her. Finally she said, "I want you to do something for me." "Sure thing, Sakura," Naruto said, "but could you untie me first?" Sakura stepped behind the pole, loosening the knot. Once the ropes fell away, he asked, "So what do you want me to do?" "I want you to ask Sasuke what he thinks of me," Sakura said, having thought about hanging herself to look like Naruto, but decided to use the real deal as she was sure Sasuke would be able to detect her. Sakura saw Naruto's face drop at what she requested, but before she could begin to twist his arm into doing it, he said, "All right, Sakura. When do you want me to do it?" Sakura was surprised but quickly said, "Tomorrow. Before Kakashi shows up, I'll hide nearby." "Okay." Naruto agreed, so Sakura, giddy that she would finally know what her crush thought of her, ran off. Confident that tomorrow she'd finally learn the key to unlocking Sasuke's heart. After all, if he told Naruto what he liked about her, she could highlight those traits to make herself irresistible to the last Uchiha. Sakura was giddy with excitement and for a moment wondered if that was how Naruto had felt when he had approached her disguised as Sasuke. However, a feeling of dread came over her as she remembered how well it had turned out for Naruto. Shaking it off, she thought, "Get over it, Sakura. No way Sasuke thinks of you as being as annoying as Naruto." The plan was relatively simple. As they waited for Kakashi to show, Naruto would casually ask Sasuke what he thought of her. Since she had arrived early, she had picked the perfect place to hide, near the bridge. Far enough away that hopefully Sasuke wouldn't sense her, but close enough that she could still hear. As the meeting time approached, Sasuke showed up promptly as usual. Watching him dreamingly, she thought, as he assumed his usual pose of leaning against the railing of the bridge with his arms crossed, "Wow, Sasuke's so cool. He makes even standing look so amazing." Arriving a few minutes late as usual, Naruto came running up. Sakura assumed that must have perked Sasuke's curiosity a little, as he expected Sakura to arrive before Naruto, but apparently he didn't feel like commenting on it. Naruto looked a little nervous and for a moment looked like he was going to back out of their deal. Sakura was sending malicious thoughts his way, which he must have sensed as he gave a small shiver. Feeling the black specter of death bearing down on him, Naruto said, "Hey Sasuke. What is it? Sasuke responded, turning his head the bare minimum necessary to look at Naruto. Well, I was just wondering, what do you think of Sakura? Sasuke replied, looking away. Hey, come on, seriously, Naruto said, stepping in front of him. Why do you care what I think of her? Sasuke asked suspiciously. I don't really, Naruto thought but said, I just want to know. Fine, Sasuke said with a shrug of his shoulders. The truth is I find her and all the girls like her annoying. In the bushes, Sakura gasped, but it got worse as he continued. I wish they would all leave me alone, as they merely serve as distractions to my goals. What's worse is they can't even get a clue and realize they are all too pathetic for me to even consider them for one day helping me restore my clan. Does that answer your question? Naruto was glaring at him but merely nodded. He caught Sakura taking off from the bushes she had been hiding in behind Sasuke on the riverbank. Naruto began walking off of the bridge but was stopped by Sasuke saying, Now I have a question for you. Turning, Naruto said, What is it? How did a dead last loser like you learn a clone jutsu as advanced as the one you used yesterday? I studied, Naruto said before walking away. Kakashi in a nearby tree watched his team's dynamics before disappearing, deciding to let the little drama unfold a little further before showing up for training today. Sakura found a quiet spot to cry, which happened to be the park where Ino and her had first met. Wrapping her arms around her knees, she pulled them up to her chest before lowering her head and letting her tears flow. I suppose I deserve this for what I told Naruto the other day, Sakura thought miserably as she replayed all the things Sasuke had said. Hey, Naruto said, walking up to her. Looking up from her knees, she saw Naruto standing in front of her with his hands in his pocket, looking uncomfortable. Please leave me alone, she said despondently before lowering her head back down. However, instead of leaving, Naruto sat next to her. Picking her head up, she glared at him, but it softened after a moment before she said, I'm sorry. For what? Naruto asked, generally perplexed. For what I said to you, Sakura replied. I said almost the exact same thing about you that Sasuke said about me. Naruto merely said, Oh, before turning to look away from her. That's it, aren't you going to say I deserve this? Sakura asked, staring at the blonde, a little surprised since she might have if their situations had been reversed. You didn't deserve it, Sakura, Naruto replied earnestly. Sakura looked at him with disbelief before he clarified his point, saying, I mean, what you said to me was true, I suppose. You never really hid that you thought it was annoying when I would ask you for dates in class. So I guess I can see why you would say I was trying to come between you and Sasuke. But the bastard was way out of line with what he said to you. Why? Sakura asked, letting the fact that Naruto had called Sasuke a bastard slide, something she would have clobbered him for a half hour earlier. Because when has he ever said anything to you about how you acted? Naruto replied. All he ever did was stare at you guys whenever you would ask him for a date. Then he'd make that annoying sound before turning to stare straight ahead or to walk away. To prove his point, Naruto stared at her in a fair approximation of Sasuke before making an sound and staring away from her. Sakura giggled slightly, feeling a little better, but said, Still, I should have realized that I was being annoying. You probably just thought he was being cool, Sakura, Naruto said, waving what she said off, causing her to blush as that would generally be her thought after being brushed off. Staring at Naruto in a new light, she thought, I guess he knows me better than I thought. Which prompted her to ask, Naruto, why do you keep asking me out? Well, because I like you, he said, scratching his cheek. But why? All I ever did was belittle you. It doesn't matter, Naruto said, looking away embarrassed. Please tell me, Sakura asked. Well, because you're beautiful. I know you don't like your forehead, but it really is charming, and you have the most amazing green eyes. Taking a deep breath, he added, and I guess because I sensed we were a lot alike. What do you mean? Sakura said, not offended like she thought she would be. Figuring he had nothing to lose, he said, Well, I guess I just sensed you were desperate for recognition too. What do you mean? She asked, but Naruto changed the subject, saying, "Anyway, you are looking at things from the wrong perspective. I mean, if you want to capture Sasuke's heart, you have a leg up on your competition." Not really caring as she wanted to know what Naruto had meant, but she played along, asking, "What are you talking about?" "Well, all your other rivals still probably have the same misconception about Sasuke that you did, and Sasuke pretty much said what you were doing wrong, so now you have a chance to correct it." "Right. Yeah," Sakura answered, but thought, "What about your feelings, Naruto? Are you giving up?" However, that didn't fit with what she knew about the blonde. Suddenly it hit her. He's trying to cheer me up by helping me with Sasuke. Feelings of gratitude as well as something else she couldn't define swelled up within her, so she said, "Thanks, Naruto." Smiling, Naruto said, "We'll train extra hard today, and before you know it, Sasuke will only have eyes for you. Believe it." However, for some reason that thought didn't fill her with the same elation as it would have before. Naruto, though, didn't seem to notice as he helped her to her feet and the pair returned to the bridge to wait on their sensei. Watching them leave, Kakashi thought, "I wonder if he realized that he used close to the same line as the one that you used to tell me made Kushina fall in love with you, sensei." Sakura watched Naruto head off on his own after training again. Although she had been working hard the past week, it felt like she was standing still compared to Sasuke and even Naruto. Granted, Naruto still screwed up from time to time, but she believed it had more to do with his own competition with Sasuke than any idiocy on his part. When he got into one of his moods, he didn't really concentrate on what he was doing as much as he should. Today had been a perfect example, as he had almost fallen off of a waterfall while picking trash out of the river because he was too busy watching what Sasuke was doing. Luckily, Sasuke had saved him, but it only made matters worse, as Naruto sulked, deciding to prove himself the next time, which of course meant he would screw up in a repeating cycle. For Sakura, shinobi life was falling far short of her romantic fantasies she used to have growing up. Training would generally start late afternoon since Kakashi was perpetually late. It would consist mainly of sparring, and although Sasuke was easily the best of the three, Naruto was making great strides. Not to mention he was completely inexhaustible, which meant by the end of the 3-hour session Sasuke would be on the defensive as Naruto kept coming. It didn't fit with the Naruto that she knew from the academy. Although that wasn't entirely correct since Naruto had tried, but when he grew bored and started to misbehave, only Iruka had ever really cared enough to try and rein him in. Maybe had the other instructors been more on the ball, Naruto would have been giving Sasuke a run for his money more often. It just raised more and more questions, which really bothered her, and was why she was once again following him as he made his way through the village. Sakura noticed again how everybody went out of their way not to notice Naruto, which she felt should be a difficult thing to do since the kid was dressed from head to toe in orange. A stray memory flashed in front of her of a young Naruto crying in a marketplace alone, and what made it all the more potent was nobody stopped to ask why. She had been with her mother and had tried to stop, but had simply been pulled along, leaving the boy alone. Naruto once again made his way to the ramen stand where he chatted and ate with the owners and operators. He then headed home to his apartment where she watched the light stay on for an hour before turning off, probably to get some sleep. Heading home, Sakura couldn't really explain her sudden interest in her blonde teammate. But it was definitely there, as she wondered why his life was so lonely. Granted, his pranks could be annoying, but they were for the most part harmless. And she couldn't get what the young woman that ran the ramen stand said out of her mind about his having a heavy burden. From time to time she could see that something weighed Naruto down, but she was positive whatever it was something he had just learned, as she couldn't ever really remember seeing him looking so serious before. But a blush adorned her cheeks as she conceded that she was too busy chasing after Sasuke to notice him. But the blush intensified as she remembered the beautiful things that Naruto had said about her eyes and forehead. Replaying the event at the bench again, she was surprised that her memory replaced Sasuke with Naruto. Just as she was surprised to learn that the same feelings of giddiness that she had felt during the original incident were still there. She figured it was because she knew that Naruto had truly meant them, which made her wonder why Naruto hadn't asked her on any dates recently. She realized why a moment later and felt her hand come up to her chest as it clenched with emotion as a result of her understanding. He was stepping aside for her happiness. He was doing what she had always wanted him to do during the academy, to leave her alone to pursue Sasuke. Sakura returned home to get some sleep of her own, figuring it would be another long day tomorrow. She had a dream of her two teammates and was surprised by how real it felt. In the dream she saw her two teammates walking ahead of her, getting further and further away. She ran to catch up, but no matter how fast she ran she couldn't catch up. Getting frustrated, she finally called out to them to wait. Much as she expected, only one of them turned to listen. Kakashi smiled as he watched his team do the D-ranked mission of doing chores on a nearby farm. Kakashi had been pleased with Naruto today, although he had been worried at first as the blonde had a habit of screwing up. He had been more mindful of him after Naruto's mistake had cost him a day's pay when the boy had destroyed a garden of priceless herbs because he had thought they were weeds and wanted to outperform Sasuke. As a result, the third Hokage had docked him, seeing as he believed it was Kakashi's job to make sure such mishaps didn't happen. He wasn't mad at Naruto as the boy reminded him too much of Obito to make that a possibility, but he had been annoyed. However, today when Naruto was about to get ramped up into another of his must-beat Sasuke moods, Sakura had approached him and gently admonished him. Although he didn't hear what she had said, it had done the trick as Naruto visibly calmed and went about doing his tasks in a more thoughtful manner. Watching the pink-haired girl struggle with a bag of feed for the livestock, Kakashi knew she was probably berating herself, since both of her teammates were still going strong. Finally she couldn't hold it anymore, dropping the bag. Sasuke had noticed but didn't stop repairing the fence he was working on, but Naruto, who was painting a barn, did and created a clone to continue his chore so he could walk over to her. He was about to pick it up when Sakura said, "I can do it, Naruto." "Don't worry about it, Sakura," Naruto replied, picking it up. "I don't mind helping. But, besides," he interrupted kindly, "because of your advice I'm actually almost done with my list instead of struggling to keep up. So take it easy and come back when you are rested." Sakura thanked him before moving towards a tree to rest in the shade. Sitting down, she admitted it felt good to rest. She was seeing improvements, but she still felt like she was standing still in comparison. She was pulled from her thoughts by Kakashi as he said, taking a load off. "I'm sorry, Kakashi-sensei. I'll get right back to work," Sakura said, moving to get up. "Relax, Sakura," Kakashi said, chuckling a little. That is what Naruto wanted after all. His amusement raised by the slightly embarrassed look that appeared on Sakura's face, but he put her at ease as he told her, "Actually, I wanted to know what you said to Naruto. As I'm sure you've noticed, he can be a bit of a handful, but today's he's been rather calm." "I didn't say anything really, Kakashi-sensei," Sakura said. "I just said he would probably do better if he didn't worry so much what Sasuke was doing." "Well, it seems to be working," Kakashi said as Naruto was feeding the livestock. Crossing his arms he added, "But maybe you should consider the same thing." "What do you mean, Kakashi-sensei?" Sakura asked, surprised. "Well, why didn't you stop when you were tired?" I didn't want to be a burden," Sakura said, still disappointed in herself. "Does Naruto look burdened?" Staring at the blonde boy as he put a little feed in his hand to feed one of the animals, Sakura shook her head and said, "He looks happy." "I'm sure he is," Kakashi said, giving an eye smile at the scene. "It's a nice change." Sakura looked up only to see that her sensei had taken off, leaving her to wonder if Kakashi knew what it was about Naruto that people didn't like. He obviously knew that Naruto was or had been lonely in the past, if what he had just said was any indication. But what changed? Sakura asked herself. "We did," she thought, almost feeling like she wanted to smack her forehead. "Sasuke and I have acknowledged him." Granted, Sasuke and he still didn't get along, but even then their rivalry seemed to have meaning to Naruto. As to her, she had been trying to be nicer to the blonde, although she still had to rain punishment down upon his skull from time to time. But even then he would look up at her, rubbing the knot on his head, smiling. As if, even though she was mad at him, it was enough that she was looking at him. It was a rather heady feeling for her to know she mattered that much to somebody. Feeling rested, she got up to go finish her share of the chores, as she knew otherwise Naruto may do them all, and she wanted to contribute to the team as well. Naruto was happy as he made his way to his home for the night, having convinced the old man to give his team a C-ranked mission. The bastard that he was supposed to guard was kind of a letdown, since he had insulted his team immediately upon laying eyes on them. He was going to go home and pack, as it was finally his time to shine, he felt, since his training was showing some real progress. In truth, he owed it to Sakura, since she would often calm him down when he was getting worked up about Sasuke. Sakura was surprising him as well, not that she was improving, as he had no doubt she was a talented kunoichi, but that she didn't seem to be trying to get closer to Sasuke. But Naruto supposed she had some sort of plan in regards to that. She had been quiet after Kakashi had dismissed them, telling them to meet at the gate tomorrow morning to escort Tazuna to his home in Wave. He wondered if the C-ranked mission was bothering her, but before he could ask, she had taken off, probably to get ready for the mission. Thinking of the pink-haired filled him with sadness, since he had vowed to stop getting in her way as she pursued Sasuke. So although he felt closer to her, he refused to parlay that into his own desire for her. Maybe that was why Sakura seemed more at ease around him, but of course it was a semi-curse to him as well. However, all that mattered was that at the end of the day Sakura was happy. Figuring if that was true he should try and find out why she was so down, he decided to put getting ramen on hold in favor of finding out why she had been down in order to help her overcome it. Sakura was sitting on a bench with a bowl of Ichiraku ramen, having acquired a taste for it from her time spying on her teammate. However, it remained in her lap uneaten. Naruto, you idiot, she thought without hostility. Although she wasn't sure if she was ready for a C-ranked mission, a part of her had enjoyed the way Naruto had talked to the third, hating the menial tasks that they were often assigned. However, while she felt more confident about her skills, mainly because Naruto often told her how well she was doing, she still didn't know how comfortable she felt about operating outside of Konoha. It would undoubtedly be a whole new world in a way, since they were operating far away from the safety of the village. It felt more real somehow. But in truth her thoughts weren't entirely directed towards the mission, but the boy who had landed them the mission. In the few weeks Team 7 had been together, he had stopped asking her out, but never stopped helping to motivate her. Her realization that Naruto was stepping aside for her happiness made her realize that Naruto was truly amazing. How many other boys would stick around helping a girl they had become convinced would never return their feelings? Maybe that's why I felt like ramen, she thought, since it seemed to be all Naruto ate. While the food brought her comfort much as the boy it was associated with, she felt like she was at a crossroads. Basically, she was going to decide if Sasuke was even worth having. Outside of the few HNs that she had managed to elicit from him, or the few times he needed to talk to fulfill a mission, Sasuke remained as distant as ever. Knowing that after years of fawning over him all he thought of her was as an annoying fangirl really bothered her. Even if he came around, she had the feeling that it would only be once she had proved herself in some way. What would that say about whatever relationship they started, that he was only with her because she finally lived up to his expectations of what the sire of his children should be? It made her feel a little hollow, especially in light of Naruto's selflessness. He was simply going to stand aside and let Sasuke claim the results of his labors, in a sense, as she doubted she would be nearly as prepared for the upcoming mission if Naruto wasn't there to pick her up when she felt down or to push her when she felt like giving up. Well, if it isn't forehead, Ino said, pulling the girl from her thoughts. Ino pig, she replied, more out of habit than anything to do with their rivalry. What do you want? I want to know where Sasuke is, Ino replied. I can't let you monopolize all his time. I don't know where he is. We have a C-ranked mission tomorrow, he's probably at home packing for it, Sakura said before trying to return to her thoughts. What, you already have a C-ranked mission? No way. It must be because Sasuke's on your team, but don't think that means you're going to become his girlfriend forehead because of that. Whatever, Sakura said, annoyed. I told you where I think he's at, so why don't you leave me alone, pig? Ino was about to do just that till it dawned on her. Sakura had told her where she thought Sasuke was. Figuring it was a trick, she said, nice try, forehead, but do you really think I'm that stupid? You tell me he's at home while you go off to where he really is. Well, not today, sister. I'm not trying to trick you, Ino, Sakura said, hoping using her former best friend's name without the insult would help convince Ino to leave. Ino seemed to sense that Sakura was being truthful but was conflicted. The part of her that had reached out to the girl that day when she was crying in the park couldn't resist asking, what's wrong? What do you care? I told you where Sasuke's at, go bother him, Sakura said, not wanting to talk about it even with her former best friend. Sitting next to the girl who glared at her, Ino said, I'm still not convinced you aren't trying to trick me. A sad smile appeared on Sakura's face before she said, yeah, I guess I can understand that. Seriously, Sakura, you're beginning to freak me out, Ino said, dropping her nickname for the girl. Ino, why do you want Sasuke? Sakura finally asked, surprising Ino. Well, because he's handsome, popular, and only the greatest ninja to come out of the academy this year, Ino said, ticking her reasons off on her fingers. But, what about him as a person? What do you mean? Ino asked, confused. Sighing, Sakura said, I mean, is he a good person? Does he care about anyone but himself? Ino stuttered for a moment, while thinking but unable to answer, asked, where's this coming from? I know what Sasuke thinks about me. He finds me annoying and clueless, Sakura said, to which Ino almost patted her back, telling her how sorry she was. But the part of her that wanted Sasuke for herself did a little victory dance, till the Pinkett said, he thinks the same of you and every other girl after him. Ino immediately stood up, saying, oh, I knew it, this is some kind of trick, very clever, Sakura. Convince me that he hates all of us and then move in yourself. That's not it at all, Sakura said angrily, wondering if she had truly been that obnoxious, but sadly felt she probably was. Deflating at the thought, she said, you know what, forget it. Ask him yourself what he thinks of you. I don't care. Sakura stood to leave, not wanting to argue in circles with the blonde. But stopped when Ino asked, is that what you did? No, Sakura answered. The pink-haired girl relayed everything that he had said about her and the other girls after him. Ino still looked conflicted about whether to believe Sakura or not, but when her former friend said, you want to know what really has been bothering me? It's that if he really felt that way, he could have said something. I think on some level he enjoys the attention while thinking us all as pathetic losers for giving it. The bastard, Sakura added, raising her hand to her lips as if she couldn't believe that she had said it. I mean, I can't even remember why I began to like him now. I gave up my first friend, let my physical training slide, and for what? So he could brush off my feelings like they didn't even matter. When all it would have taken was a simple, not interested, or I don't know, something. Instead, he had to be Mr. Cool and simply ignore us, which really should have been a clue, but I was too dense to notice. What's worse is I was doing the same thing, she finished in her head, thinking of her own treatment of Naruto sadly. I'm not much better, but she smiled slightly, remembering that according to Naruto she was simply because she hadn't held back about how annoying she had found his antics. However, unlike her, who having been told she was annoying was thinking about giving up, he kept coming back. No, that wasn't exactly true. He was stopping in order to respect what he believed was her wishes of being with Sasuke. Again she felt her heart clench at the emotions that suddenly seemed overwhelming. Ino was about to ask why her Sakura had trailed off and was staring off into space, but was beaten to it by a shout of, Sakura. The voice seemed to pull Sakura out of her trance, and Ino noticed a smile appear on her face for a moment. What is it, Naruto? Sakura asked, Ino temporarily forgotten. Well, you seemed sort of down. I wanted to make sure you're alright, Naruto said while looking around smelling the delectable aroma of Ichiraku. Thanks Naruto, Sakura said kindly, surprising Ino, who felt as if she had been forgotten. I guess I was worried about the mission. I'm sorry. I suppose I shouldn't have pushed the old man into giving it to us. No, don't worry about it Naruto, Sakura replied, placing a hand on Naruto's arm in a gesture that had become familiar to the two over the weeks but surprised the hell out of Ino. I mean, the Hokage did ask Kakashi-sensei, who said we are ready. I'm just a little worried I'm going to hold you and Sasuke back. Don't worry Sakura, Naruto said sincerely, you're going to do fine. Scratching the back of his head and noticing the rapidly cooling ramen, he said, hey, are you going to eat that? Seeing that Naruto's gaze was focused on the forgotten ramen, she said, no, you can have it. The smile that split his face made Sakura feel happier than she had been moments before. Sitting, he gulped it down in record time, saying, you should have said you like Ichiraku, Sakura. It's my favorite. I have all sorts of free vouchers, maybe we can. The way he trailed off made Sakura frown, especially since she figured he was going to ask her for a date. Not picking up on it, Naruto said hurriedly, well, don't worry Sakura, everything will turn out just fine. I better get going and pack for the mission. I'll see you tomorrow, bye, he shouted the last sentence over his shoulder as he took off. Sakura watched him go, Ino still forgotten, as she found herself wishing he had finished his thought about going together, as the few minutes he had been there really had lightened her load. Ino for the most part was trying to decide if she was in some bizarre mirror world. An upside-down world, where Sakura almost seemed sad to see Naruto go or had shared her meal with him. Not to mention the things she had been saying about Sasuke. She pinched herself, giving a little yelp which made Sakura focus on her again. I have to get going too, Ino. See you later, Sakura said, walking away. Ino watched Sakura before remembering the day Sakura had told her and all the other girls that she had liked Sasuke. Ino remembered she had been angry, but not because of whom she had said she liked, but the reason for it. Remembering the reason, she blurted, you were trying to fit in. Pardon? Sakura asked, confused at Ino's sudden outburst. The reason you picked Sasuke was because you were trying to fit in, Ino said, remembering how she thought Sakura was simply trying to blend in again by hiding her feelings. You picked him because everyone else did. Sakura stared at her for a moment before saying, maybe you're right. It doesn't matter anymore. You can have him. Saying that made Sakura feel a lot better. Maybe Ino had a point, maybe she had picked Sasuke because he was safe. As the girl with the giant forehead, she didn't want to pick a boy that may have resulted in her being teased again. She couldn't say for certain, but as she walked away from the stunned Ino, she had meant what she had said about it didn't matter. She had wasted enough time chasing after Sasuke. It was better to focus her favor on someone who wanted her for her, not for what she might become in the future or years from now would feel she was finally good enough. Although Naruto certainly fit the bill, she couldn't say that she was positive she wanted to be with him as anything other than a friend. But maybe this upcoming mission could give her a glimpse of what Naruto was like over an extended period of time. After all, thus far she had only been given glimpses of the depth that Naruto possessed. Maybe this mission would give her more and help answer some of the lingering questions she had. Ino watched Sakura walk away, still shocked that in effect her rival had thrown in the towel. Just as the girl was disappearing out of sight, Ino pinched herself one last time to make sure she wasn't dreaming. When the world didn't fade away, she guessed she was still awake, but the euphoria that she expected never came. Instead, she felt rather hollow. Was it because Sakura simply quit, that in the end her charms hadn't been the cause? Or was it because of what Sakura said about Sasuke, thinking of her as a nuisance? In the end, she decided to simply worry about it later in favor of heading home. Since she felt with Sakura out of the race, when she came to a conclusion Sasuke was as good as hers, if she still wanted him, that was. The next day came a lot sooner than Sakura wanted, but she decided to face it as a proud kunoichi. She was a little self-conscious since last night she had decided on some changes. She wasn't surprised that Sasuke stared at her, raising an eyebrow, but refused to comment, nor was she shocked when she heard the surprised, "Sakura, your hair. Do you like it?" Sakura asked Naruto, holding a hand up to her shorter hair. "Well, sure," Naruto said, not sure what to say, as although he always found her hair beautiful, never really thought about if he preferred it long or short. "Do you think it's better like this?" Wishing that Sakura would stop putting him on the spot, he said, "No matter how it's cut, Sakura is always beautiful," figuring that would stop her from asking more. It did, but he wasn't sure why her cheeks were getting red. Tazuna showed up before Sakura calmed herself enough to say anything, so instead of talking in front of the old man, they settled into silence. Kakashi showed up 5 minutes late but promptly got them moving towards Wave. Sakura watched Naruto, who seemed to be the most excited since he had never been out of the village before, unable to keep the smile from her face. While she hadn't cut her hair to impress Naruto, it made her feel better to know that he didn't care if she wore her hair a certain way, as it simply proved that as far as Naruto was concerned, he liked everything about not just one facet. Even the things she had considered ugly were part of her charm, according to Naruto. As he walked away ahead of the others, his hands behind his head, she thought to herself, "I wish I saw what it was that you see in me, Naruto. But you know what? I'm beginning to see something special in you too." Smiling as Naruto started an argument with the bridge builder, Sakura followed behind, confident that with Naruto around everything would turn out fine. Sakura didn't know what to make of Naruto sometimes. As they had made their way to Wave, they had been ambushed by 2 mist shinobi. Naruto had froze, which turned out to be not that big a deal, as Kakashi, who they had thought had been killed, ended up saving the day after Sasuke had managed to get in a few attacks against the opponents. She hadn't been much better though, only managing to get in front of Tazuna as one of the shinobi had made for the bridge builder before their sensei saved the day. Afterwards, Sasuke had asked if Naruto was scared before calling him a scaredy cat, which naturally riled Naruto up to no end. Kakashi had also contributed a little by mentioning how he didn't expect Naruto to freeze up, but had calmed him by telling him he had probably been poisoned, so shouldn't move. Sakura wasn't sure if Kakashi was telling the truth or simply playing around with Naruto, as the Junin hadn't seemed too worried and instead confronted Tazuna about the assassins. Telling the bridge builder that they were operating outside the scope of their mission, he threatened to take them back to Konoha. Sadly, Sakura realized she had probably also contributed to making Naruto feel bad by trying to use his wounded hand to justify going back to the leaf instead of admitting to her own fears. While Kakashi had agreed, Naruto had pulled out a kunai and then stabbed himself in the wound in order to let the poison out. Needless to say, she had been shocked by his actions, but was also surprised at how serious he sounded when he told Tazuna that he would protect him. But moments later, he was moving around like a fool again after Kakashi told him he could bleed to death. After binding Naruto's hand and listening to Tazuna's story, Kakashi had agreed to continue the mission. Naruto seemed calmer as they walked, occasionally looking to his bandaged hand like remembering some promise to himself. She switched her attention to Sasuke, who looked as calm as ever. She had been surprised when Sasuke had appeared in front of her when the assassin moved on the bridge builder. A part of her almost believed it meant that maybe Sasuke was coming around to her charms. But she supposed it simply was he still viewed her as useless and needed protection. It sort of galled her, except he had been right. After moving in front of Tazuna, she had really no other plan of attack. Watching Naruto, who was still up in front of the group, she decided to go talk to and apologize to him. Naruto still felt useless after everything that went down. Glancing once more at his wounded hand, he repeated his promise of never backing down or losing to Sasuke again to himself. He realized a moment later that in a sense he already broke it, as he was stepping aside in the quest for Sakura's heart. But he supposed that was okay, since Sakura's happiness was more important than he desired to best Sasuke. It had hurt a little when Sakura had said they should go back because of him. While she had sounded worried, it had just compounded his feelings of uselessness. So caught up in his thoughts he had missed hearing his name the first time Sakura had said it. Replying the second he said, "Huh, what's up Sakura? I just wanted to say I'm sorry Naruto." Setting aside his more pensive concerns he said happily, "What do you have to be sorry about Sakura?" "For what I said about going back to Konoha because of your hand," Sakura replied. Naruto looked like he was going to wave off her apology as he often seemed to do, but before he could she said, "I should have been honest." "Honest about what?" "About why I wanted to go back and it had nothing to do with your hand," Sakura said. She smiled internally as Naruto's face scrunched up as it often did when he was confused, so she made herself clear, "I'm afraid this mission has already moved up to AB and I don't think I'm ready." Naruto, to her surprise, instead of trying to make her feel good by telling her not to worry, said, "Yeah, but you're probably more ready than me. At least you didn't freeze up." Looking at Sakura seriously he said, "I don't know what's going to happen next Sakura. But I promise I won't let anything bad happen to you." Sakura couldn't explain why, but she knew that Naruto would keep his promise no matter what happened. A part of her almost believed that even if he was seriously wounded he wouldn't allow himself to die until his promise was kept. She looked away wanting to say something along the same lines but couldn't find the resolve to make a promise like that. Instead she settled for a simple, "Thanks." They walked side by side until they reached the Land of Fire's coastline. Before anyone could ask how they could get to Wave from there, Tazuna said, "We'll wait here. I have a ride already arranged, but we'll need to wait for the right conditions." "Right conditions?" Sasuke asked, curious. "Everyone that helps me is taking a huge risk," Tazuna said. "Therefore we need to wait until early morning for the mist to form before he'll arrive." "Fair enough," Kakashi said before ordering his team, "Sasuke, gather some firewood. Sakura, Naruto, you'll set up camp while I'll keep an eye on our client." While going about her task, Sakura noticed that Naruto's bandage was getting dirty. Not wanting him to get an infection, she finished setting up the last tent before calling Naruto over. He held up his hand telling her he'd be there in a moment before putting the finishing touches on the fire pit. "What is it Sakura?" he asked as he approached. "Let's take a look at your hand," she said, pulling out a few medical supplies. Naruto sat cross-legged from her, holding up his hand. Unwrapping it, Sakura did a double take as she didn't see a wound or even a hint of one. Looking at Naruto, who was staring at her wondering why she was looking at his hand so intensely, he said, Sakura, is everything alright?" "Huh? Naruto, your wound is gone," Sakura said in confusion. "Okay, good," he said, moving to stand up. But he was pulled back down by Sakura, who hadn't relinquished his hand. Staring at the boy she said, "That isn't normal Naruto." "Sure it is Sakura," Naruto said. "No Naruto, it isn't. I mean there isn't even a scab," Sakura said. Arriving at the only conclusion she could think of, she asked, "Do you have a keke genkai?" "A what?" Shaking her head she said jokingly, "How did you ever graduate if you don't even know what that is?" However, despite her light tone, something appeared in Naruto's face, almost like a painful and happy memory all rolled up in one. As she watched Naruto's face, she began to wonder just how did Naruto graduate. He failed the test after all, as it was based on the clone jutsu, his worst. But then when they had gathered a few days later for team assignments, Naruto had been there and with a far more advanced clone jutsu. According to Kakashi, it was AB ranked 1, which genin normally weren't allowed to learn. He had needed to explain why when Sasuke had asked to be taught it. So how did Naruto know it? She wanted to ask the boy himself, but Naruto was proving to be amazingly tight-lipped when it came to talking about himself. Outside of his desire to be Hokage and that he wanted people to acknowledge him, she didn't know much of anything about him. She supposed she could ask, but she doubted she would get a straight answer. But maybe she could ask someone who knew him. The ramen stand owners might answer her if she went by asking about Naruto, or maybe even Iruka-sensei. The embarrassed sound of Naruto saying, "Sakura." Realizing she was zoning out, she focused on Naruto. She wondered why his face was red till she realized she had been holding his hand the entire time. Dropping it like it was hot, she felt her own cheeks flush before explaining what a keke genke was. Upon hearing her explanation, he said, "I don't think I have a genke kaka, Sakura." A keke genke, Sakura said, repeating it with a small smile, but it faded when Naruto seemed to retreat in on himself with a frown. Was he thinking about why he healed so quickly? He seemed to come to a conclusion but apparently didn't feel like sharing. She wanted to know, yet how could she possibly ask someone that for most of her life she put down that he could tell her his secret? "Hey you two, now's not the time to be staring at each other all lovey-dovey," Kakashi said teasingly, causing both of them to blush again. Sakura looked up and noticed that his eye traveled to Naruto's unbandaged hand before moving to the supplies that she had intended to use on the wound. His eye then moved to her, and although it was impossible for the genin to read the experienced Junin's masked face, she was confident that he was concerned about her noticing his wound was gone. Does Kakashi know about Naruto's advanced healing? But as soon as she asked herself the question, she realized he must have. As he had been staring at the wound right after Naruto had stabbed it. Had it already been healing then? Kakashi had seemed overly concerned as he had looked at it. Had he been surprised by the wounds disappearing? Furthermore, why wasn't he commenting on it now? He obviously could see it was gone. She was about to mention how weird it was, but Kakashi beat her to the punch, saying, "If you've finished setting camp, why don't you help Sasuke gather firewood?" "Okay, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto said a little too quickly, apparently glad for the excuse to get away from Sakura and her questions. Sakura stood up a little less eagerly, sending a look after Naruto before turning back to her sensei, who was watching her closely. She wondered briefly if she asked him about Naruto whether or not would she get an answer, but doubted it. What was worse was that she imagined the Junin would be able to lie to her so convincingly that she would ultimately believe whatever he told her. Deciding to ask people she could read better, she nodded her acceptance to his request before moving off to search for some wood. Naruto never felt so overpowered in his entire life as the mist rolled into the area as they stood around Tazuna to protect him from the shinobi that Kakashi called Zabuza Momochi. He wondered how things had ended up like this. Granted, Tazuna had admitted that he had pissed off a gangster named Gato, since his bridge was going to end the chokehold he had on the small country. But an actual Junin on Junin fight was nothing like what he imagined it would be. Just the man's presence had been enough to make him want to run home and bury his head under the covers. Only his recently made vow had kept him from doing so. He did take some small measure of pride in knowing that Kakashi needed to comfort Sasuke. Looking away from his rival, his eyes landed on Sakura, who was shaking badly still despite Kakashi's words to protect his teammates. Reaching out for her hand, he grabbed it, giving it a gentle squeeze. Sakura focused on him for a moment and stopped shaking. He hoped it was because of the promise he made her. Watching Kakashi fight Zabuza was incredible and really made him realize how far he had to go before he could even consider being made Hokage. When Kakashi was caught in the water prison, he felt all hope drain from him. The clone that Zabuza formed easily batted him back, knocking his headband loose. The clone then stepped on it, causing Kakashi to shout for them to run from the water clone. Naruto almost did exactly that, but remembering the wound that he had given himself and his vow, abandoned that decision. After all, even if they ran, once Zabuza finished Kakashi, even he knew that their odds of survival were low. Unless they abandoned Tazuna, something he promised not to do. Sasuke apparently came to the same conclusion, charging in before Naruto could himself. Watching Sasuke being snatched out of the air in mid-attack almost broke Naruto's resolve. After tossing Sasuke away, the clone said, "You call yourselves shinobi. You can only be called shinobi after bathing yourselves in the blood of your enemies. When your name's been entered in my bingo book, maybe then would you be worthy of the title shinobi. You're not shinobi so much as cowering children. Now hand over the bridge builder." Naruto chose that moment to attack, but he didn't target the clone so much as what it stood on. He heard the worry in Sakura's voice as he closed with the clone but pressed on. He took the hit as expected but smiled upon feeling the comforting coolness of the faceplate of his headband. Standing, he tied it around his head before saying, "Put this in your book." The future Hokage of the leaf Naruto Uzumaki never backs down. Turning to Sasuke, he whispered, "Sasuke, I have a plan, so listen up." But before he could explain it, the clone moved, kicking Sasuke around several times. Naruto responded by creating dozens of shadow clones that all swarmed the menacing Junin. After throwing them all off, Naruto tossed a windmill shuriken to Sasuke, who spun and threw the one he pulled as well as the hanged Naruto at the real Zabuza. Zabuza reacted as expected, snatching the one out of the air before jumping over the second that changed back into Naruto, who threw a kunai, forcing Zabuza to dodge, thus releasing Kakashi. Sakura watched in awe as Kakashi and Zabuza began to battle once more. But she directed her gaze to Naruto, who disappeared for a moment as the two water dragons clashed, destroying each other. Breathing a little easier as he resurfaced, spitting out some water and making for the shore. Retaking her position of defending Tazuna, she thought, when did Naruto become so clever? It was just so surprising to see, especially since he must have come up with it in mere moments. In the academy there were questions that outlined different scenarios, but Naruto almost never passed them. Was it the danger that made him so much better at it? As it seemed impossible just how thought out his strategy had been, and Zabuza fell into like a ranked genin, not the invincible Junin he had seemed to be moments ago. Sakura watched as Kakashi hit Zabuza with a giant vortex of water which sent him flying until he ended up pressed against a tree. Kakashi threw several kunai at him that hit Zabuza along his arms and legs. Zabuza said something to Kakashi that she couldn't make out, and it appeared that he responded. But then out of nowhere Zabuza was struck by two Senbon, killing him. Naruto seemed the most upset about the sudden demise of the rogue ninja, making Sakura wonder why. However, she didn't have to wonder long, as he began complaining about how strong the boy was that did it while he felt so useless. Kakashi appeased him, telling Naruto that in the world of shinobi age didn't necessarily matter. He calmed, but she could tell it still bothered him. Yet before she could try to make him feel better after the hunter nin left, Kakashi collapsed, forcing her to focus on more immediate concerns. Tree climbing was easy for Sakura. It simply came natural to her. However, the price for her skill was helping Kakashi watch the bridge builder, which was boring. Meanwhile, Naruto and Sasuke were still trying to get it down. Blowing out a bored sigh, she tried not to think about the fact that Zabuza was probably still alive, and if he was, that meant that the hunter nin was with him. Despite the future danger, she couldn't escape the fact that the mission was making Naruto more mysterious, not less. The unexplained advanced healing, the sudden head for tactics, and simply why certain things like how he graduated made him nervous. She supposed the tactics shouldn't have been that surprising, as some of his pranks had required some careful planning, but still the spur of the moment planning was pretty impressive. But the other two things were somehow connected, of that she was sure. Before she could dedicate any real brainpower to puzzling it out, Kakashi said, "Why don't you take a break, Sakura?" "Sure thing, Kakashi-sensei," Sakura said, eager to escape the boring assignment if even for a little while. Making her way through the village, she frowned, seeing the state of the place. How anyone could force people to live in such squalor, especially since Gato already had so much, was beyond her. It made her glad they continued the mission despite the increased danger. She decided to check in on Naruto to see if he had progressed any in his own tree climbing exercise. It made her smile when she thought about how he came and asked her for help. She had caught Sasuke looking her way when Naruto was in the process of asking, but she figured it would sting his pride too much to admit she was better than him at something, to the point that he needed to ask for her help. Reaching the area, she stopped out of sight, although not sure why. Peeking around a tree, she saw Naruto lying on his back. A part of her was worried he had knocked himself unconscious, as he tended to land on his head a lot. However, Sasuke, who was making his way towards Naruto, didn't seem to be concerned. Sasuke stopped at Naruto's head before saying, Earlier, you asked Sakura for some tips. Sitting up, Naruto rubbed the back of his head saying, "What of it? What did she say?" Sasuke asked, looking away from the blonde. "I'm not telling," Naruto said in a snotty tone of voice that made her smile, especially due to the way Sasuke's head snapped down, glaring at the blonde. What Naruto said next made Sakura feel gratitude well up in her heart. "Ask Sakura yourself. I mean, really, do you think I could explain it better than her?" Sasuke said before walking away back to his own tree. Sakura idly wondered if she appeared would Sasuke as her. But she decided against it as she was sure that Naruto may ask for the Uchiha. Walking away, she once again marveled at how selfless Naruto could be, as he was now actively trying to get her and Sasuke together. It really made her wonder what it had been that had kept her chasing after the Uchiha, as he wouldn't even ask her for a little help. An image of her future life if she married Sasuke floated before her. She imagined herself doing all the housework, being a stay-at-home wife, while Sasuke continued to be a ninja. She'd dot on their children, of course, but she could see Sasuke coming home from a mission and giving her a kiss on the cheek. He'd then move to the kitchen table and ask when dinner was due to be ready. It felt so lifeless to her. Even the kiss had felt like he did it because it was expected, not because he felt anything for her. Thinking of the kids that Sasuke would almost certainly insist on, she could see them being respectful and wanting their dad's attention, but he'd probably focus his attention solely on making sure they were competent shinobi. Watching the family around the dinner table, Sakura Uchiha found it lacking somehow. Almost like a painting of what a family should be, but lacking the warmth. Sitting next to her husband, he'd politely thank her for making dinner before eating. When he was finished, he'd show his children some ninjutsu before retiring for the night. Giving her a polite good night, he'd sleep in his own bed before the day would repeat again the next day. She didn't want that kind of life, at least not anymore. She tried to imagine her life if she fell for someone more like Naruto, to which her imagination conjured up an older Naruto. She was surprised that it showed her one taller than her, and if her imagination was anything to go by, he'd grow up to be amazingly handsome. Once again her husband would come back from a mission, only this time it was Naruto. She wasn't sure if she had given up being a ninja, as she was wearing a variation of what she normally wore. But she was standing in front of the sink washing some dishes. Naruto approached her, placing a kiss on her forehead, knowing she preferred it to a simple kiss on her cheek. Upon hearing their dad was home, the kids would come running into the kitchen, latching onto Naruto's legs. He picked up the youngest before smiling at the other two her imagination showed her she'd have. They gathered around the table, banging silverware on the table, asking for dinner jokingly. Despite the less refined and more chaotic environment, Sakura Uzumaki didn't seem to mind giving her family a smile and seemed to be way happier than her Uchiha counterpart had seemed, as she placed takeout from Ichiraku on the table, somehow knowing the small ramen stand would be a mainstay in the family's dining habit. Sitting next to her husband, he gave her a kiss and had to admonish him for getting a little too fresh in front of the kids, but didn't truly mind. Digging in, she watched the children eat much the same way their father did, and while a little concerned it seemed her future family would have no manners, found it somehow fitting. After dinner, Naruto would play with the children. He'd teach them some ninjutsu, but it would be more akin to play than actual lessons. Then after the children were asleep, Naruto would take her up to the bed they shared, where he would. Sakura stopped her imagination there, wondering if she was secretly a pervert, considering where her fantasy was heading. However, it did tell her what she needed to know, which was simply a life with Naruto wouldn't be such a bad thing. Granted, her portrayal of Sasuke may be colored by her feelings of hurt at what he said about her. But it was simply too easy to picture Sasuke that way now. Not that he wouldn't care or love for his children, but that he would never show it. On the other hand, she could just as easily see Naruto acting the way her fantasy showed her. She had really enjoyed the short glimpse of a family like the one she imagined she could have with Naruto. A family, where even if he became Hokage, he wouldn't be too busy to spend time with his family or take himself too seriously where he couldn't act like a big kid himself. That made up her mind for her at least as far as what she needed to tell Naruto, and that was to stop trying to get Sasuke to like her. She wanted a future filled with smiles and laughter, not calm stoicism. Sakura awoke a little earlier than was necessary, but since Naruto hadn't come back to Tazuna's the night before after hearing the tale of Inari's father, she was a little worried. Even if Kakashi didn't seem concerned, as he was confident Zabuza would need at least a week to recover. Heading to where Naruto and Sasuke were training the day before, she saw the blonde talking to a beautiful girl in a pink kimono. She couldn't believe how angry she got at seeing Naruto talking to the girl. Stopping down on her jealousy, she called out, "Naruto." The blonde turned, waving cheerfully to her. Running up to him, she said, "Are you trying to catch a cold staying out here all night?" The girl chuckled before saying, "He must be precious to you." Sakura blushed in embarrassment but said, "He is my precious teammate." She caught the look of surprise on Naruto's face but ignored it, asking, "And who would you be?" Although she tried to be civil, her tone did have a hint of challenge to it, making her wonder if it was related to the jealousy she felt. The girl smiled, perhaps sensing her reason, before saying, "As I was telling your precious friend, my name is Haku and I'm here searching for herbs for a friend of mine." Standing, the girl said, "Well, I have what I need." Walking away, Haku stopped, saying, "Oh, by the way, you need not fear me stealing him away, I'm a boy." Blushing, she turned to see Naruto looking around. Confused, she asked, "What are you looking for, Naruto?" "Well, I thought the bastard was here when he said you didn't need to worry about someone getting stolen away," Naruto said, obviously thinking the boy had been talking about Sasuke. "Idiot," she said, shaking her head before playful adding, "How would he even know about Sasuke?" Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto said, "I don't know. I thought all girls had a thing for the bastard, so you must communicate telepathically." Embarrassed of her past actions, Sakura said, "Actually, I came out here to tell you something." "Oh yeah?" Naruto said, getting up a little wobbly. Helping to steady him, Sakura grabbed a hold of him before saying, "Come on, let's get you back for some breakfast." Allowing Sakura to lead him away, he asked, "So what did you need to tell me? I know you told Sasuke to ask me on how to climb the trees using chakra." "Did he?" "No," Sakura said, "but that isn't the point. I was just trying. I know, Naruto, and I appreciate it," Sakura said, giving him a smile. "But I don't want you to do it anymore." "Why not?" Naruto asked. "Is it interfering with your plan to capture his attention?" "Wait a second. I got it. You're playing hard to get. You're ignoring him to make him see you differently from the other girls." "That's not it at all," Sakura said, looking forward. "It's simply, I don't want someone so cold." She could see out of the corner of her eye Naruto looking at her in surprise, and his eyes couldn't exactly hide the hope just behind them. "Not exactly ready to start accepting dates from him yet either," she said. "Anyway, for right now, I think I'll just concentrate on being the best kunoichi I can be." Naruto seemed to get the message, looking ahead himself, saying a simple, "Okay." Sakura smiled. But a part of her, the piece that often spoke for her when she hid her emotions, said, "You chicken. Just accept you feel different about him and tell him to ask you out." "No," Sakura said to her inner self, "Naruto is special, but I want to know more about him." "What's to know?" Inner Sakura said. "He likes you and finds you attractive." Forehead. Inner Sakura made her point by pointing to her own large forehead. A little red dot appeared on it, which Sakura took to represent the kiss he had planted there. Remembering it caused Sakura's cheeks to flush, causing the dot on Inner Sakura's head to grow bigger. Naruto asking, "Are you okay, Sakura?" cut into her mental argument. "Yeah, I'm fine," Sakura said, still a little flustered. "Okay. I was getting worried you were getting all red in the face like Hinata." "I'm fine, I promise," Sakura said. But Inner Sakura said, "Are you now? But your problem is you think you have all the time in the world to make this decision. Don't forget about Hinata." Confused Sakura asked her inner self, what about her? It wasn't words she received in response but images of Hinata blushing, whenever Naruto came near, or the many times the girl sat near him during class at the academy. Realizing what it was her inner self was getting at, she said, she likes him. Exactly, inner Sakura said as if talking to an idiot, and the only reason she hasn't made a move is because she's so shy. Not to mention you saw how hot you imagined Naruto to be when he gets older. Add on to that how good he makes us feel about ourselves, and the question is, do you really want to miss out on that? Sakura didn't have an answer, so inner Sakura ended their conversation with a coward before going silent. Reaching the house, Naruto began gobbling down breakfast, but Sakura wasn't feeling all that hungry all of the sudden. Had she made a mistake in letting Naruto think she still wasn't interested in him? She had little doubt that Naruto might eventually become a heartthrob. After all, she had only been with him a few weeks and he had effectively made her do a complete 180 on how she felt about him. However, she reasoned now wasn't the time to be thinking about such things as they were in the midst of a deadly mission. However, once they got back, she planned to think about it hard. Stupid Inari, Naruto thought as the boy had leached all the joy he had felt in climbing to the top of the tree. Although Sasuke had also reached the pinnacle, he had still felt great about his accomplishment, especially since with Sakura's advice he hadn't worn himself into the ground to do it. Then Inari had started complaining. He hadn't meant to sound like such a jerk, but the kid's whining had grated on his nerves. He had headed outside to cool his head when an idea hit him. Inari needed to see what a hero could do. Not to mention he didn't like the idea of waiting around for Zabuza to make his move, especially with Gato being a stone's throw away. The way Naruto saw it, Zabuza worked for money. So if he took Gato out of the equation, then Zabuza would back off. Smiling at the audacity of it, he headed back in to grab his ninja tools before jumping out the window in order to confront Gato in person. Unbeknownst to him, his leaving was watched by a young man wearing a pink kimono, having no doubt that the boy and girl he had encountered would be trouble. Guessing that Naruto was going to attack Gato, he considered letting the boy go. However, he knew Zabuza would be angry if his large payday was killed before getting the money. Quickly changing into his hunter clothes, he moved in pursuit, yet hoping he arrived too late. Sakura had never seen Naruto snap like that at anyone. Sure, he yelled when upset, but he had sounded genuinely angry at what Inari had said. After he took off, she noticed that Kakashi had gone to talk to Inari. Guessing that the subject would be Naruto, she followed, hoping to gain a little insight into the blonde. She stayed just out of sight, but didn't doubt that Kakashi knew she was there. I know it sounded harsh. But Naruto doesn't hate you, Kakashi said. I imagine it's simply that you touched a nerve, seeing as he didn't have a father growing up either since he lost both his parents. He didn't really have any friends growing up as well. But I've never seen him sulk or cry. I guess he simply ran out of tears. Sakura noticed that the look on Inari's face softened slightly at hearing Naruto's tale. Out of everyone, I suppose Naruto understands what you are going through best, since he was alone for most of his life. That's why he seeks to become Hokage and be acknowledged. So don't take what he said to heart, as I'm sure it's something he's said to himself hundreds of times. Sakura felt bad for all the times she thought Naruto had it easy since he didn't have any parents. She was about to go in search of him when Sasuke came outside, making right for Kakashi, saying, I think we may have a problem. Why's that? Kakashi asked, sending one of his eye smiles to the eavesdropping Sakura. Stepping out of the shadows, she frowned when Sasuke said, the loser's gear is gone. And I can't find him. Sighing, Kakashi said, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Why, Kakashi-sensei? Where did he go? Well, Sakura, put yourself in Naruto's shoes for a moment. You heard about a gangster who killed a good man, and everyone knows where to find this gangster but are too afraid of him to do anything about him. Not to mention he's hired a dangerous rogue ninja to eliminate another good man. Getting what Kakashi was saying, she said, he going after Gato. That's what I would expect from the Leaf's #1 knuckle-headed ninja, Kakashi said. Well, anyway, I suppose we should go rescue him. Although he sounded laid back about it, he was worried. While Gato probably didn't have any shinobi at his shipping company where he stayed, he didn't know if Naruto could handle all the guards the man had around it. Gato was sitting across from a team of 3 shinobi, all wearing masks in the same vein as the little punk that served Zabuza. Leaning back in his sofa, he said, giving a slimy smile, "So there you have it, gentlemen. Once Zabuza kills the bridge builder, I'll tell you where he's hiding. You must realize we could force you to talk," the lead hunter said, causing Gato's men to reach for their swords. "You touch me, Zabuza will disappear by the time you find out," Gato said, holding up a hand to tell his men to relax. "I can understand you're all hot to trot to get him, but all you need to do is sit back and relax and I'll hand him to you on a silver platter. Unless you want to kill the bridge builder for me, that is. We can't afford a confrontation with the Leaf," the hunter said. "I suppose we'll simple have to do it your way." The lead hunter was standing to leave when an alarm sounded. "What the hell is going on?" Gato shouted angrily. One of his men wearing a mic earpiece reported, "A trespasser has entered the grounds. They believe it's one of the shinobi. Wait a second, a whole battalion of trespassers just appeared. They appear to be all the same person." The hunter got up from his chair, moving to the window, and saw hundreds of clones attacking the guards. "The shadow clone jutsu," he said. "It appears that the Leaf has decided to go on the offensive." Motioning to his 2 fellow hunters, they burst into action, killing Gato's men in a handful of heartbeats. Surprised, Gato said, "What the hell are you doing? Judging by how well your men are holding up, it is unlikely you are going to survive the night." The hunter's 2 underlings grabbed Gato by the shoulder as he procured a wicked-looking knife. "I told you we have ways of getting the information from you. It looks like we'll have to use them." Naruto smiled at the chaos his clones were causing. While they distracted the guards, he had climbed to the roof and was planning to bust into the large office windows that he had seen on his way through the shipping dock. He was almost to the ledge when he was kicked back. Getting back to his feet, he came face to face with the hunter from before. "You faker," he snarled at the false hunter Nin. "I'm sorry for the deception. However, I could not allow your sensei to kill my master," the masked boy said calmly. "I ask that you desist from this attack, as I'll be forced to harm you." "Never," Naruto said angrily. "Didn't you hear what I said to Zabuza? Naruto Uzumaki never backs down." "I'm sorry," the boy said, and Naruto was surprised when it sounded like he actually meant it. Haku moved faster than he had ever seen, quickly closing the distance between them before ramming his fist in Naruto's stomach. Folding around the punch, he was kicked away, causing him to skid along the roof. Just getting back to his feet, Naruto was again sent flying by another hit from Haku, this time a kick to the middle of his back. As Naruto tried to get up on wobbly arms, the masked boy said, "Please, any further attempts to get up will force me to kill you." "I made a promise," Naruto said, standing. "I would protect Tazuna and I wouldn't let anything bad happen to Sakura." The masked boy actually took a step back as Naruto looked at him, his eyes flashing red for a moment as he said, "The only way you're ever going to stop me is to kill me." Haku pulled his Senbon, letting them fly as the boy charged him. However, he was caught by surprise when Naruto created a clone in front of him whose back he used to leap over the Senbon, which impaled the clone, dispelling it. He attempted to reach for more, but was hit in the face by the falling blonde, knocking his mask loose. Naruto stared in shock as he recognized the face of Haku. Picking his mask back up, Haku said, "Hello again, Naruto. I truly wish we didn't have to fight." "Then why are you helping Zabuza?" Naruto said, confused how such a gentle person could work for a creep like that. "I told you, he's precious to me," Haku said, alluding to their earlier conversation. "As a child I was alone and unneeded. Then one day Zabuza found me and I had a purpose. I exist simply as his tool to bring about his dreams." "How can you say that?" "Because having no purpose to live, to be unwanted, surely you can understand why such a fate I would wish to avoid," Haku said, sensing that Naruto did indeed understand. Grabbing his stomach, Naruto said, I can understand that loneliness hurts, but this existence isn't any better. To exist is simply a tool. How is that any different than being alone? Because Zabuza is precious to me, and that is why I cannot allow you to harm Gato, Haku said with his mask back in place. I'm truly sorry. Haku charged Naruto again, but this time Naruto was ready. When the boy got halfway to him, he created a dozen shadow clones that charged Haku from all sides. Haku followed the one he believed was the original, stabbing it with the kunai he had pulled. But he was surprised as it turned into smoke. So sure was he that he had followed the right Naruto, he had left himself open to attack, being hit by 5 of the clones at once straight into the air. One of the clones folded his hands in front of him, giving Naruto a boost as he placed his foot on them. Reaching Haku at the peak of his climb, he hit him downward with enough force to send him crashing through the roof. Haku picked himself up to find himself in a room with 3 other hunters and Gato, who was not dead yet, but probably would be soon. Since the top of his skull was removed, and he had electrodes plugged directly into his brain. As soon as the leader laid eyes on him, he said, You must be the false hunter Gato was talking about. We haven't managed to learn where Zabuza is at yet, so why don't you save us the trouble and tell us? Never, Haku said, preparing to flee. I thought you'd say that, was the leader's reply as he nodded to his 2 underlings who charged at the unspoken order. However, as they passed through the hole Haku had made, a bunch of Narutos fell on the pair. Locking up at the hole, he saw the real Naruto say, Come on. Confused as to why the blonde would help him, he nevertheless ran up the pile of bodies, leaping through the hole, landing next to Naruto. Why? Never mind that, Naruto shouted, running over the side of the building with Haku right behind him. Those were real hunters, right? And they're after Zabuza and you. Yes. Have they ever seen your face? Naruto asked as they hit the ground, moving through the boxes of cargo sitting on the large pier. I don't. Give me your mask, Naruto said, pulling Haku into a little alcove of boxes. Doing as instructed, Haku handed over his mask, so Naruto hanged himself to look like the boy and placed it on his own face. Ditch your clothes and try and get some different ones. I'll draw them away. Why? Because I do know what it's like to not have anyone, Naruto said sadly. Tell Zabuza about Gato probably setting him up, that should mean we aren't enemies anymore. They could hear footsteps moving over the wood, so Naruto darted out of the alcove. Haku heard a shout of, There he is, so quickly changed into his kimono. Moments later, the hunters passed by. The leader stopped to look at him for a moment, but apparently found him to be no threat before chasing after the retreating Naruto. He was fairly confident that the hunters would let Naruto go after they realized their mistake, but with any luck he and Zabuza would be long gone by then. I'm going to strangle that idiot, Sakura thought, both angry and worried at the same time. How can he be so reckless? But upon arriving at the dock, she felt some of her fear abate as they saw the state of Gato's shipping headquarters. Covering the grounds were the moaning and groaning guards of Gato. Sasuke apparently was just as surprised as her as he said, the loser did this. Don't underestimate what a lot of shadow clones can do, Kakashi said. With that jutsu, Naruto can literally be a one-man army. Yet you won't teach it to me, Sasuke said, a little angry. It wouldn't matter if I did, Kakashi said, turning to his student. You wouldn't be able to make more than 3 without completely exhausting yourself. Sakura noticed Sasuke's jaw clench at that but said, Who cares about that right now? Where's Naruto? My guess is he'd be where Gato is, Kakashi said, leaping onto a shipping crate to run towards the building at the center of the area, followed by his 2 charges. Finding the hole in the roof, the 3 dropped down and were shocked to find Gato with the top of his skull missing, with electrodes in his brain. Shit, Kakashi swore, leaping back through the hole to scan the grounds. What is it, Kakashi? Sakura asked, a little unwell at what they had seen. That's a technique used by Kiri Hunter Nin to get information from a target. By stimulating the electrodes, they can force a person to reveal secrets he doesn't necessarily want to and tends to work faster than drugs. So what's the big deal? They aren't after Naruto, are they? Sakura asked. Hard to say, Kakashi said. If they know about Zabuza's helper, they may suspect him of being it and give him the same treatment as Gato. A large explosion on the dock attracted their attention. Guessing that was where Naruto was, they leapt down to run to the aid of their teammate. Naruto shook his head to clear the bells ringing in his ears. Looking around, he could see one of the hunters on his back, having been a little too close to the large container of gas when his fire jutsu missed and hit it. He searched for the other two, but a moment later a whip of water wrapped around his neck. Being pulled taut, it yanked Naruto off his feet towards the lead hunter, who said, "You've given us a merry chase, boy. But now it's time to tell us where your master is." Dropping his henge, he pulled off Haku's mask, saying, "My sensei is at the Tazuna residence." Making an annoyed sound, he said, "Don't play games with me, boy. Where is the boy you were pretending to be?" "I don't know," Naruto said, thinking of a lie on the spot, "but he was never here. I wasn't sure I could get to Gato, so hanged myself to look like Zabuza's hunter nin partner." He trailed off to let the hunter fill in the rest, which his underling who was helping his partner up did, saying, "That way Gato would think if he escaped that Zabuza had betrayed him." Naruto simply nodded. The leader said, pulling the water whip tighter, "Still, I think we should kill you just for the aggravation. Because of you, there's a good chance Zabuza knows we are here." "Oh, I wouldn't go that far," said the smooth voice of Kakashi. "Particularly, due to the matter that it was you that killed Zabuza's meal ticket." Making the same annoyed grunt as before, the hunter allowed the whip to return to its liquid state. Turning to the new arrival, he said, "Kakashi Hatake. Well, I suppose there's no use hanging around here then." Forming a hand sign, he turned into water, draining into the cracks between the boards, as did his two assistants. "Naruto, you idiot!" Sakura yelled, bopping him on the head, sending him back to his rear before picking him up and shaking him. "What's the big idea running off by yourself like that? Did you enjoy making me worry? Well, answer me." Actually, Sakura, I think he's kind of lost consciousness," Kakashi said, rubbing the back of his head. "I didn't mean to." "Relax, Sakura," Kakashi said, chuckling, "it's simply from all the chakra he's expended. He'll probably be as good as new in a few days." Taking Naruto from the girl, he placed him on his back, saying, "All right, everyone, let's go. I think the people of Wave are going to wake up to quite a happy tomorrow." Kakashi had been putting it mildly when he said that the people of Wave would be ecstatic at the news that awaited them the next day, as they had celebrated almost from sunup to sundown. Naruto had slept through it all. Although the village celebrated, Tazuna had kept working on his bridge, to which most of the men who had quit returned. She had to give the man credit, as he had welcomed them back warmly despite their abandoning him before. She had been tasked to stay and watch Naruto and the household while Kakashi and Sasuke watched the bridge builder. Although Gato was dead, there may have been people loyal enough to him to try and stage an attack against Tazuna or his family. It was unlikely, but there was no sense in leaving it to chance. She didn't mind though, as she watched Naruto sleep, admitting that he was kind of cute already. Moving a stray strand of hair from his forehead, she was tempted to kiss it but resisted. She just couldn't wrap her head around Naruto anymore. Granted, on the surface he was the same reckless troublemaking boy from the academy. But beneath it he was proving to be so much more. He had charged into a dangerous situation head first, and if the mask they had found was any indication, had almost been killed to help a boy who was technically their enemy. What was really amazing was that he grew up like that despite being alone and, from what she could see, ostracized from the very village he planned to one day lead. With only a teacher, the Hokage, and two ramen stand owners being the only people that seemed to care if he woke up the next morning. He was a true diamond in the rough. When she got back to the village, she planned to have a talk with Iruka about just how Naruto graduated. From there she wasn't sure, but she was closely considering giving into herself to simply admit that Naruto would probably make an excellent boyfriend. However, she figured it couldn't hurt to get a little closer to him before making that decision just yet. Hearing her name, she looked over at the bed, seeing that Naruto was staring at her. What happened? He asked, looking around the room. Stomping down on the anger the memory of why he was there raised, she replied, "You exhausted yourself fighting all of Gado's men." "Oh," was the simple one-word reply. After a moment he asked, "Am I in trouble?" Kakashi didn't seem too upset. Sakura replied, "In fact, I think he was kind of expecting something along those lines from you." "What happened to Gado?" Naruto asked. Sakura answered, telling him that Gado had died as a result of the hunter interrogation and that the people of Wave had been celebrating all day. She smiled softly, seeing that by the time she finished her story, Naruto had gone back to sleep. Giving into temptation this time, she stood, placing a gentle kiss on his forehead, and her smile widened as she saw one appear on Naruto's face. Getting up, she decided to see if Tsunami needed any help with getting supper ready, as soon the others should be returning. It took several more weeks before the bridge was finished. The whole town had come to see them off since the mission was over. Sakura smiled as Naruto and Inari did their best not to break down and cry in front of each other. Walking back, she really couldn't wait to get home. Along the way, Sakura realized something. While Kakashi had punished Naruto for going off on his own, in the form of extra training, which Sakura didn't really think Naruto minded. He had almost seemed pleased by Naruto's answer of why he did it. Which he explained his thought process by saying, "Well, the way I saw it was we were focusing on the wrong problem." "Oh really? Do tell," Kakashi had said, giving an eye smile. A little shy due to being put on the spot, he said, "Well, I figured Gado was at the center of the problem, therefore if we took him out then everything else would sort itself out." "So you went there to kill him?" Kakashi said. "What, no. Just scare him a little, show him that we could get to him if we wanted to," Naruto said. "That's exactly why I didn't suggest doing that," Kakashi said, causing all of the genin to stare at him in surprise. "Your idea was a sound one in theory, Naruto," Kakashi explained. "With Gado out of the way, nobody would have been around to pay Zabuza, causing him to lose interest in Tazuna. But let me tell you what would more than likely have happened had you simply tried to scare him. More than likely Gado would have hired more missing nin, making our job far more dangerous." "I'm sorry," Naruto had said upon realizing his mistake. "It's okay, but next time you get a foolish notion in that head of yours, run it by me first, alright? I can more than likely point out any holes in it," Kakashi had replied, rubbing the top of Naruto's head. What Sakura realized was one of the reasons that Naruto didn't give as his grounds for going. Which was his promise to her to make sure nothing happened to her during the mission. Although he didn't mention it, she was sure it had been one of the motivations for Naruto's attack on Gado headquarters. It was the way he looked at her as they got off the bridge that told her that, like he felt he had kept his word to her. He didn't say anything, of course, and she was beginning to realize he never really boasted. He spoke highly of himself, sure, but he never actually talked about his accomplishments. He had single-handedly fought 30 of Gado's guards, led 3 hunter nin on a chase through the dock, buying enough time for that Haku boy to escape, and at some point before the mission learned a clone jutsu that according to Kakashi was way outside of what a genin should be able to use. But he never once mentioned any of those accomplishments. He didn't even rub them in Sasuke's face, something she figured he'd be dying to do. Forming a list in her head, she decided to do some research on her teammate. First, she would visit Iruka, as she was positive there was something about Naruto's graduation that was outside the norm. Then she'd visit the library to find out any information on the strange Kekkei Genkei that Naruto seemed to have that caused him to heal so quickly. Not to mention it seemed to replenish his chakra far quicker than normal as well, since Kakashi had needed a week to heal from chakra exhaustion, while Naruto had needed a day. Sakura, while lost in thought, was alert enough to notice Kakashi hold up his hand signaling them to stop. She was surprised when her sensei said, "You can come out now. That is unless you plan to follow us all the way to Konoha." The only reason you knew I was there is because I let you, was the reply as Zabuza stepped out from behind a tree along the trail with Haku doing so from another. Well then, to what do we owe the honor? Kakashi asked, his guard appearing relaxed but was ready to move at a moment's notice. I didn't come for a rematch if that's what you are asking about. I came because of that loud-mouthed brat of yours. Addressing Naruto, the demon of mist said, Haku tells me we owe you and that you pretended to be him to allow him to escape to warn me. Why? Because with Gato out of the way there was no need to fight, Naruto replied. Zabuza began laughing before saying, you're a foolish naive little brat. Zabuza, Haku said. However, I'm in your debt, so is there anyone you want killed so we can square things, Zabuza said. Naruto shook his head before saying, just don't treat Haku like a tool anymore. Both former Mist Shinobi were surprised by Naruto's request. Zabuza said, that's it. Apparently you don't realize what a boon it is to have another shinobi in your pocket. I don't care about that, Naruto said seriously, I'm going to be Hokage someday. There's nothing that you can do that I don't plan to be able to do for myself one day. But to Haku you are his most precious person and all he wants is to make your dreams come true. He doesn't deserve to be treated as something that you can discard as unnecessary one day. He deserves the same level of respect from you that he gives to you. Although Zabuza didn't break down and cry, Sakura though she could detect a watering of Zabuza's eyes. He turned away saying, you're a fool and I doubt you're going to live very long in this cursed world of shinobi. But regardless, I'll honor your request. Come along Haku. Naruto began waving to them as they disappeared into the woods, and shouted, take care Haku. When I become Hokage you'll have to stop by for a visit. A quiet, I'd like that, was the boy's reply. Naruto smiled before taking the lead again saying, alright let's get going. It's been so long since I've had Ichiraku that I think I'm going through withdrawal. Well we can't let the hero of Wave suffer now can we, Kakashi said jokingly. Sakura noticed that again Sasuke's jaw clenched at the title the people of Wave have given Naruto. Something he seemed to do a lot whenever it seemed Naruto had outperformed him. Let's continue with the tree leaping exercise, Kakashi said referring to the faster method of moving through the trees that he had taught them while the bridge was being finished. Alright, Naruto said jumping into the trees first. As Sakura joined her team moving through the trees she decided that maybe checking into Naruto could wait until after she just so happened to stop by Ichiraku for a meal. After all it had been a while for her too.